Sylvester Stallone built an empire playing heroes, Rocky Balboa, John Rambo, men who stood for honor, loyalty, and brotherhood. But behind the camera, away from the choreographed punches and scripted redemption, there was a different story. A story of grudges that burned for decades. One actor dripped mustard on his pants and got physically thrown from a car. Another tricked him into the worst role of his career. One legend walked off set, muttering in the third person. And one former best friend allegedly slept with his wife. These aren't just Hollywood feuds. These are blood rivalries that shaped careers and destroyed friendships. Hit that subscribe button because the truth behind Stallone's toughest battles wasn't fought in a boxing ring. Richard Gere. The mustard incident that never ended. The feud between Sylvester Stallone and Richard Gere didn't start with tabloid headlines or award show snubs. It started with condiments, a cramped car, and an elbow to the skull. The year was 1974, and both actors were unknowns fighting for relevance in a low-budget film called The Lords of Flatbush. Gere played Chico Tyrell, a member of a 1950s greaser gang. Stallone was Stanley Rosiello, the group's muscle. They shared scenes in the back seat of a car during a critical sequence, and according to multiple accounts, Gere made a catastrophic mistake. He was eating a hot dog between takes. Mustard dripped onto Stallone's pants. Not a small stain, a noticeable yellow smear across expensive wardrobe that would require reshoots and cleaning costs the production couldn't afford. Stallone's reaction was immediate and violent. He elbowed Gere in the side of the head, grabbed him by the collar, and physically ejected him from the vehicle. Crew members watched in stunned silence as Gere stumbled onto the pavement, dazed and humiliated. The director faced an impossible choice: fire both actors and lose shooting days, or pick a side. Gere was let go. His scenes were reshot with Perry King. For Gere, it was a devastating early career setback. For Stallone, it was a demonstration of dominance that set the tone for decades. But the mustard incident was only the beginning. 2 decades later, the feud reignited at an Elton John party attended by Princess Diana. According to David Furnish, Elton John's husband, Stallone arrived to find Gere deep in conversation with Diana. Not casual conversation, the kind of animated, intimate discussion that suggests chemistry. Stallone's jealousy flared instantly. He approached the pair and confronted Gere in front of dozens of A-list witnesses. Accounts vary on the exact words exchanged, but multiple sources describe Stallone accusing Gere of inappropriate behavior. Diana, mortified, excused herself. Gere stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated despite Stallone's physical advantage. The two men stared each other down before mutual friends intervened and separated them. The incident became an instant legend in Hollywood circles. Not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. Stallone's grudges didn't fade with time or success. The man who'd thrown Gere from a car 20 years earlier was still ready to fight him at a charity event. Gere never publicly responded to either incident. His career flourished with An Officer and a Gentleman, Pretty Woman, and Chicago. Stallone's career followed its own trajectory. They never worked together again. They never reconciled. To this day, the mere mention of Richard Gere in Stallone's presence reportedly creates palpable tension. The feud raises uncomfortable questions about masculinity and ego. Was the mustard truly an accident? Or was Stallone simply a man whose insecurities manifested as aggression whenever he felt slighted? Whatever the truth, their rivalry became one of Hollywood's longest-running Cold Wars. Bruce Willis, The $4 Million Betrayal. When Sylvester Stallone conceived the Expendables franchise, he imagined a brotherhood of action legends. A last hurrah for aging warriors standing together against impossible odds. Bruce Willis signed on enthusiastically for the first film in 2010, playing Mr. Church, a mysterious CIA operative. The film was a nostalgic love letter to 1980s action cinema. And it worked. The Expendables grossed over $274 million worldwide. Willis returned for the sequel, and audiences loved seeing him share the screen with Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, the holy trinity of action heroism. But behind the scenes, Willis's behavior had become problematic. Crew members reported him showing up late, leaving early, and displaying little enthusiasm during takes. He fulfilled contractual obligations with technical precision, but zero passion. For Stallone, who'd poured his heart into the franchise, Willis's indifference felt like betrayal. When pre-production began for The Expendables 3, Stallone reached out to Willis's representatives about reprising his role. What happened next shocked everyone involved. Willis's team demanded $4 million for 4 days of work, $1 million per day, for a supporting role, in an ensemble cast. Stallone was furious. The Expendables wasn't a cash grab. It was a passion project with tight budgets that prioritized practical effects over massive salaries. Other A-listers had taken reasonable deals because they believed in the concept. Willis's demand felt like extortion. Stallone called his bluff. He refused the terms immediately and had Willis's character written out within 48 hours. Then he did something that sent a clear message to the industry. He called Harrison Ford. Ford agreed to join The Expendables 3 for a fraction of Willis's asking price. Not because he needed the money, but because he respected what Stallone was trying to accomplish. On social media, Stallone posted a now infamous message: "Greedy and lazy, a sure formula for career suicide." He didn't name Willis directly, but everyone knew exactly who he meant. The post went viral instantly, sparking debates about actor compensation, loyalty, and entitlement. Willis responded through silence, never publicly addressing the controversy. His representatives issued vague statements about scheduling conflicts, but nobody believed them. The damage was done. For Stallone, the Willis situation represented everything wrong with modern Hollywood. Actors who'd forgotten the collaborative spirit that built the industry, who treated franchises as ATM machines rather than artistic endeavors. The Expendables 3 underperformed at the box office compared to its predecessors, earning just $214 million worldwide. In 2022, Willis announced his retirement from acting due to aphasia, a language disorder affecting cognitive abilities. Some wondered if early symptoms had already been affecting his judgment during the Expendables 3 negotiations. But Stallone never softened his stance. In interviews, he maintained that Willis's behavior was indefensible regardless of circumstances. Greed was greed. Disrespect was disrespect. Their relationship remains frozen. No reconciliation. No olive branches, just two legends who once shared the screen, now divided by pride and principle. Eddie Murphy. The wife, the accusation, the end. In the late 1980s, Sylvester Stallone and Eddie Murphy represented opposite poles of Hollywood stardom. Stallone was the action hero, all muscle and masculine intensity. Murphy was the comedic genius, charisma, and rapid-fire wit. Despite their differences, they'd become genuine friends, bonding over shared experiences, navigating fame's impossible pressures. But in 1987, everything changed during the production of Beverly Hills Cop 2. Stallone's wife at the time, Brigitte Nielsen, had a supporting role in the film opposite Murphy. Filming required them to spend long hours together, and rumors began circulating almost immediately. Whispers spread through Hollywood that Murphy and Nielsen were having an affair. Tabloids caught wind and began running suggestive headlines without concrete evidence. The rumors reached Stallone while he was on location for another project, and his reaction was explosive. Stallone called Murphy directly, confronting him with an accusation that would end their friendship forever. According to Murphy's account in a candid 1989 Rolling Stone interview, Stallone didn't mince words. "You fucked my wife," Stallone said, his voice cold with certainty. Murphy was blindsided. He denied the allegation immediately and emphatically. "Down, brother. I didn't fuck your wife," Murphy insisted, trying to diffuse the situation with humor and directness. But Stallone wasn't convinced. Despite Murphy's denials, Stallone's suspicion had hardened into belief. For Murphy, the accusation was deeply insulting. It questioned his integrity, his loyalty, his character. More importantly, it revealed that Stallone was willing to believe rumors over his friend's word. In the Rolling Stone interview, Murphy addressed the accusation with unusual candor. When asked if Nielsen was his type, Murphy didn't hold back. "Did I ever want to fuck Brigitte? No, she's not my type. She was married and married to someone who was my friend. I'm not that kind of guy." The denial was absolute and specific. Murphy detailed how the rumors had poisoned a friendship he'd valued. The fallout was immediate and permanent. Stallone and Murphy stopped speaking entirely. No attempts at reconciliation, no mutual friends successfully mediating. The friendship simply ended, replaced by cold professionalism when their paths occasionally crossed at industry events. For Stallone, the suspicion never fully disappeared. Even years later, he reportedly remained convinced something had happened, despite Nielsen herself never confirming the affair and Murphy's consistent denials. Nielsen's role in the controversy is worth examining. She'd married Stallone in December 1985 after a whirlwind romance. They divorced in 1987, the same year as the Murphy allegations. The Murphy-Stallone rift illustrates how celebrity marriages exist in pressure cookers of gossip, jealousy, and assumption. What makes this feud particularly tragic is that Murphy and Stallone had been genuine friends. One accusation, one phone call, one moment of suspicion destroyed all of that. Both men went on to maintain successful careers. But they never collaborated, never reconciled, never spoke publicly about each other with anything approaching warmth. Kirk Douglas. The legend who left. When Kirk Douglas was cast as Colonel Sam Trotman in First Blood, the 1982 film that would launch the Rambo franchise, it seemed like perfect casting. Douglas was Hollywood royalty, a living legend with decades of iconic performances. Having him play John Rambo's mentor would give the film instant gravitas. But from the moment Douglas arrived on set, it became clear this wasn't going to be smooth. Douglas, then 65 years old, came to the production with strong opinions about the script, the character, and the film's direction. More importantly, he came with an ego carefully cultivated over 40 years of stardom. Director Ted Kotcheff and Sylvester Stallone quickly realized they were dealing with someone who didn't simply want to perform his role. Douglas wanted to reshape the entire film according to his vision, and he wasn't shy about expressing his demands. The first sign of trouble came during early rehearsals. Douglas read through his dialogue and immediately declared it unacceptable. He insisted on completely rewriting his scenes, changing motivations, altering character dynamics, and restructuring the narrative flow. But the most disturbing aspect of Douglas's behavior was how he discussed his demands. He referred to himself in the third person constantly. "Kirk doesn't say these lines," he'd announce. Or, "Kirk Douglas should have this line instead." The affectation wasn't charming. It was alienating and egotistical. Kotcheff and the producers tried to accommodate him. They spent long nights rewriting scenes, incorporating Douglas's suggestions, attempting to find compromises. But nothing was ever enough. Douglas remained perpetually dissatisfied, always finding new elements to criticize. The breaking point came when Douglas insisted on changing the film's ending entirely. In David Morrell's original novel, Rambo dies at the conclusion. The film's script had wisely changed this to allow Rambo to survive, setting up potential sequels. Douglas hated this change. He demanded they revert to the original ending. For Kotcheff and Stallone, this was non-negotiable. They'd specifically altered the ending to avoid the nihilism of the novel and create a more commercially viable film. The arguments escalated. Douglas became increasingly hostile, his third-person declarations growing more frequent and bizarre. Finally, Kotcheff had enough. In a confrontation that has become Hollywood legend, he called Douglas out directly. "Kirk, here's the situation," Kotcheff said calmly. "I provided you with a script, and you took it and said you loved it. We're filming the script that you loved. If you want to act in that script, I'd be glad to have you. But if you don't, you can leave." The set fell silent. Douglas stared at Kotcheff for a long moment. Then he delivered one final third-person declaration. "Kirk's leaving." He walked off set immediately. No goodbyes, no negotiations. Kotcheff and Stallone moved quickly. They contacted Richard Crenna, who agreed to take the role immediately. He showed up the next day, having memorized his lines during the commute. First Blood became a massive success, grossing $125 million worldwide and launching one of cinema's most enduring franchises. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the prank that became friendship. The rivalry between Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger defined 1980s action cinema. Two massive egos, two different approaches to heroism, both fighting to be crowned Hollywood's ultimate action star. They circled each other like prize-fighters, measuring box office returns like punch statistics, turning every premiere into a competition. But their rivalry produced one moment so perfectly devious that it became legendary. The story of how Schwarzenegger tricked Stallone into starring in one of the worst films of his career. The year was 1992. Stallone's career was at an interesting crossroads. Rocky and Rambo had made him an icon, but he was trying to branch out, to prove he could do more than intense action dramas. He was hungry for roles that would expand his range. Schwarzenegger, always paying attention to his rival's moves, saw an opportunity. A script was circulating called Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, an action comedy about a tough cop forced to work with his overbearing mother. It was a terrible script. Everyone in Hollywood knew it was terrible. But Schwarzenegger saw potential, not in the film, but in what the film could do to Stallone's career. He began a carefully orchestrated deception. Schwarzenegger started expressing public interest in the project. He had his agents make inquiries. He arranged meetings with the producers. He made sure word got back to Stallone. The trap was set. And Stallone, driven by competitive instinct and the desperate need to prevent his rival from claiming any project, took the bait completely. Stallone's agents contacted the producers immediately. He moved aggressively to secure the role, negotiating quickly and signing on before Schwarzenegger could finalize any deal. The moment Stallone's contract was signed, Schwarzenegger dropped all interest. He'd never wanted the role. He'd simply wanted to trick Stallone into taking it. Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot was released in February 1992 to devastating reviews. Critics savaged it. The audience stayed away. It grossed just $70 million against its $45 million budget, branding the film as one of Stallone's biggest embarrassments. Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars. The New York Times wrote that Stallone looked pained throughout, as if he knows he's made a terrible mistake. For years, the prank remained a rumor. Then, in an interview decades later, Schwarzenegger finally admitted the truth. "It's 100% true," Schwarzenegger said. "I knew it was a terrible script, so I leaked that I was interested in tricking Sly into doing it. He fell for it." When confronted, Stallone could only laugh ruefully. "He tricked me," Stallone said. "He's always been clever." But something unexpected happened. Instead of intensifying their rivalry, the revelation seemed to diffuse it. By the 2000s, they began collaborating rather than competing. They appeared together in the Expendables franchise, celebrating the genre that had made them both legends. The transformation from rivals to friends became one of Hollywood's most heartwarming stories, and the Stop or My Mom Will Shoot prank remains the perfect encapsulation of their rivalry's brilliance. Carl Weathers, The Friendship That Fractured, Apollo Creed was supposed to be a one-film character, a flashy, arrogant heavyweight champion who gave Rocky Balboa his shot at glory before being defeated. But Carl Weathers brought such charisma and depth to the role that Apollo became essential to the Rocky franchise, appearing in the first 4 films and defining the series' emotional core. On screen, Rocky and Apollo's relationship evolved from rivalry to respect to deep friendship. Off-screen, the relationship between Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers followed a much darker trajectory, one marked by creative clashes, financial disputes, and resentments that never fully healed. The problems began during Rocky II. Stallone, now writing and directing in addition to starring, had complete creative control. Weathers, having proven himself indispensable in the first film, expected to be treated as a creative partner rather than simply an actor for hire. But Stallone's vision for Rocky the Sanu didn't include extensive input from his supporting cast. He'd written Apollo's arc with specific intentions, and he wasn't interested in alternatives. Weathers, trained in improvisation and used to collaborative environments, found Stallone's directorial approach restrictive and frustrating. Tension escalated during the filming of the rematch. Stallone choreographed every punch, every movement, with meticulous precision. Weathers wanted room to add spontaneity, to make the fight feel more organic. Their creative philosophies clashed constantly. The financial aspect made things worse. Stallone was earning millions as star, writer, and director. Weathers was being paid a supporting actor's salary, despite Apollo Creed being essential to the film's success. He felt undervalued and began expressing his frustration openly. By Rocky III, their relationship had deteriorated significantly. The film's script reduced Apollo to a training partner, stripping away the character's dignity in favor of making him Rocky's motivational support. Weathers hated the diminished role, but needed the paycheck. Behind the scenes, Weathers became increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction. Crew members reported frequent arguments between him and Stallone about dialogue changes, character motivations, and screen time. What had once been professional disagreement hardened into personal animosity. The breaking point came with Rocky IV. Stallone's script killed Apollo Creed in a brutal fight against Ivan Drago, using the character's death as motivation for Rocky's revenge. It was a shocking creative choice that devastated Weathers. Apollo's death wasn't just a plot point. It was the elimination of the franchise's second most important character, and it happened without meaningful consultation with the actor who'd brought him to life. During the filming of Apollo's death scene, tension on set was palpable. Weathers performed the brutal beating with Dolph Lundgren, knowing it was his final moment in a franchise he'd helped build. After Rocky IV, Weathers and Stallone rarely spoke. When the Creed franchise was developed decades later, Weathers wasn't meaningfully involved in the creative process. Stallone reprised his role as Rocky, mentoring the next generation. Apollo appeared only in flashbacks, his legacy honored, but his creator excluded. Dolph Lundgren, the punch that nearly killed. When Sylvester Stallone cast Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, he was looking for someone physically intimidating enough to believably threaten Rocky Balboa. Lundgren, a 6'5" Swedish martial artist and chemical engineer, fit the requirements perfectly. What Stallone didn't anticipate was how dangerously real their fight scenes would become. Stallone prided himself on realism in the Rocky franchise. The fights weren't pretty Hollywood choreography with pulled punches and careful camera angles. They were brutal physical encounters where actors actually hit each other, using technique to minimize damage while maximizing visual impact. But Rocky IV took this approach to a terrifying extreme. Stallone wanted the fight between Rocky and Drago to look apocalyptic, a battle between titans where every punch carried genuine consequence. He pushed Lundgren to hit harder, to be more aggressive, to make the violence feel real. During the filming of their climactic fight, Stallone made a decision that nearly cost him his life. He told Lundgren to actually hit him, not pull punches or use careful technique. Just hit him, full force, and they'd capture the genuine reaction on film. Lundgren, trained in Kyokushin karate and possessing frightening physical power, was hesitant. He knew his own strength and understood the danger. But Stallone insisted, and as the director, his word was final. The punch came during a sequence where Drago was supposed to dominate Rocky. Lundgren threw a right hand that connected with Stallone's chest with the force of a sledgehammer. Stallone felt something was wrong immediately. Not just pain, but a sensation of wrongness deep in his torso. He finished the take through sheer willpower, then collapsed the moment the director called cut. The pain intensified over the next few hours. By evening, Stallone could barely breathe. His chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside. By the next morning, Stallone was in agony. He finally admitted he needed medical attention and was rushed to a hospital in Vancouver. The diagnosis was shocking. Lundgren's punch had slammed Stallone's heart against his chest cavity with such force that the heart had begun swelling. The pericardium, the protective sac around the heart, was inflamed. If left untreated, the condition could have been fatal. Doctors told Stallone he was experiencing the kind of trauma typically seen in car accident victims. The punch had essentially created a cardiac contusion, bruising the heart muscle itself. He was admitted to intensive care immediately and kept under observation for 4 days. The incident was kept quiet during production. When word eventually leaked, it became part of the film's mythology, evidence of Stallone's dedication. But the punch created a complicated dynamic between Stallone and Lundgren. Lundgren had simply done what he was instructed to do, yet he had to live with the knowledge that he'd nearly killed his director. Rocky IV became a massive success, grossing $300 million worldwide. But the easy camaraderie Stallone shared with other action stars never fully developed with Lundgren. The punch became a dividing line neither man could cross. Sylvester Stallone's feuds reveal a man shaped by competition, insecurity, and an inability to forgive perceived slights. Richard Gere's mustard became a decades-long grudge. Bruce Willis's greed destroyed a friendship. Eddie Murphy's alleged betrayal ended a brotherhood. Kirk Douglas's ego nearly derailed a franchise. Arnold Schwarzenegger's prank eventually forged respect. Carl Weathers's creative frustrations were dismissed. And Dolph Lundgren's punch nearly ended everything. These weren't just personality clashes. They were the inevitable collisions of massive egos operating in an industry that rewards dominance and punishes vulnerability. Stallone built his career playing heroes who never quit, never backed down, never forgave. In real life, he lived that same code. The grudges he carried shaped his choices, his collaborations, his legacy. Some feuds softened with age, others remained frozen, permanent reminders that even heroes are capable of pettiness, jealousy, and spite. If these stories changed how you see Stallone, hit that like button and subscribe, because the real fights weren't in the ring.